Today we're going to be graphing sums of functions. One of those functions, or maybe both of those functions, will be a trig function, will be a sine or a cosine function. The other function could just be a linear function. Usually it's just a linear function, or maybe we're going to be graphing two trig functions added together. So if we had a problem like graph y is equal to x minus sine of x pi over 2 in the interval between 0 and 4 for x, what would we do with a problem like this? Well, the first thing I would do is I would see, since we have a sine function here, I'm going to start with just sketching this out and noting some important values in this domain. And then I'm going to figure out the value of this function at all of those important x values, and then I'm going to add those two together, and then I'll get a list of x and y values that I can put on a graph. So first of all, let's see what negative sine of x pi over 2 is. We've got an amplitude of 1. We have a period of 4. So this would be, and we don't have a horizontal shift. So what we would do is we would go between 0 and 4, cut it in half, cut it in half. So there are the important x values, and a negative sign is upside down. So here is our graph of negative sine of x pi over 2. Next thing I'm going to look at is the other value. So I'm going to take a table. I'm going to make a table of the important x values that I just graphed, and they were 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are the key values for x. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make another column. This second column is going to be the value of this first function. The next column, the third column, is going to be the values, the y values of this negative sine of x pi over 2. And so my second column, it's just y equals x. So all I have to do is just copy over. If this said y equals 2x or y equals 4x, I would put that function in there, and I would just, whatever the math is, I would put that in this column. But these x values are just exactly the same as those important points. So I'm just going to keep that for the first function. So remember, these are the important, the key x values on my trig function. This column is the first function, and the second column, or the third column, is the next function, negative sine of, x pi over 2. And those values are 0, negative 1, 0, positive 1, and 0. And then the next thing I'm going to do is sum the second and the third column. So these two numbers added together, these two numbers added together, these two, and these two. So here's our table of x, y values that we want to take a look at graphing wise. Looks like the lowest y value we have is negative 1. The highest y value we have is positive 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my important x values. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a quick sketch of that negative sine function, just lightly in red, just to see what it looks like against the other function, y equals x. So hopefully you can see that, or you can take a colored pencil, maybe a red pencil, and graph that sine function. The other function is y equals x. Y equals x, I'm going to do that in green, so 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4. So this is y equals x. I'm going to be adding y equals x to negative y equals negative sine of x pi over 2. And then adding together, I'll have the points 0, 0 from this last column, 1, 0, 2, 2, 3, 4, and 4, 4. And now I'm just going to try to imagine what that would look like if I added these two functions together, the green and the red. So what happens is this red line is going down a little bit faster than the green line is going up, just slightly in the beginning. So since I have to go through 0, 0, and 1, 0, but I know I'm not going to go straight across, it looks like I'm coming down a little bit. Then I have to go through 2, 2, so I'm going to come up here. I have to go through 3, 4, so I'm even coming up even higher. And then instead of going straight across, because this graph is a concave down graph, I'm just going to slightly go up and put a little hook in there. So there's the graph of y equals x minus sine of x pi over 2. So it's the red and the green added together. The next example we'll do is y equals 2x minus cosine of pi x. And this time the domain is x is between 0 and 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is sketch a quick graph of the negative cosine of pi x and see what that looks like. So in this case, the period is 2 pi over pi, which is 2. But they want us to go all the way out to 4, so I'm going to have to graph 2 full cycles of this negative cosine curve. So it starts at -1, goes through the midline, up to +1, down to 0, and down to -1. So the first cycle of this curve between 1 and 2, and now I have to go out to 4. So there's my negative cosine curve. Y equals 2x is going to be a pretty steep line starting at 0, 0. This is 0.5, so it would be 0.51, 1, 2, 1.53, 2, 4. So this will be going pretty steeply up. But I'm not going to graph that right now. I'm going to set up my x table. So the important points along this curve are 0, a half, 1, 3 halves, 2, 5 halves, 3, 7 halves, and 4. We've got 8 total points. My first function is y equals 2x. So all I have to do is double all of those numbers in this column. And then the next column is the negative cosine of pi x. And then we'll add those two together to get our final xy values to sketch. So these values are starting at -1, 0, +1, 0, -1, 0, 1, 0, and it ends at negative 1. So then we're going to sum these two, the last two columns, negative 1, 1, 3, 3, 3, 5, 7, 7, 7. Looks kind of weird, those numbers. We'll see what this graph looks like in the end. Our final point on this y equals 2x graph is 4, 8. So I want to go up to 8 on my y-axis, and negative 1 is the lowest value. So we'll just mark out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, I went too far. And I think I'll just lightly sketch in my negative cosine curve like I did before, just to get practiced at sketching that. And this negative cosine function is going to be added to the 2x function. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And y equals 2x. 1, 2, 2, 4, 3, 6, and 4, 8 is the last point. So this is y equals 2x. And then the sum of those two will be these xy values. So 0, negative 1 is the first point. 1/2 1 is the second point. 1, 3. 3/2 3. 2, 3. 5/2 5. You notice that all the x-intercepts here is going to be exactly on the green curve. 3, 7. 7/2 7. And 4, 7. And so now when we're adding these together, looks like we're going to be coming up like this. And then we have to go through all these through these points. So we're going to be coming down and around so we can hit them all. And coming up and hitting them all will go like this. So there's our graph. If you wanted to put this in your graphing calculator, it might be a good idea to take a look at what this looks like. The last example I'm going to do today is going to be the addition of two trig functions. And I'm going to add a cosine function to a sine function. I think that would probably be the best one. Let's get y equals 3 cosine of x plus the sine of x. See what that graph looks like. So in this case, the period is equal to 2 pi. And I think we will have our domain be between 0 and 2 pi. So instead of graphing both the cosine and sine graph, I think I'm going to just set up my xy table. And the important points between 0 and 2 pi because this is just a plain old cosine and sine graph, or 0 and pi over 2, pi and 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So in my first column, I'm going to put 3 cosine of x. In my next column, I'm going to put sine of x. And then I'm going to add the two together. So if you can imagine the 3 cosine of x curve, it starts up at the top point. It goes top, middle, bottom, middle, top. And the sine of x curve starts at the middle, goes up to the top, goes back to the middle, goes to the bottom, and then ends at the middle. So if we sum those two columns together, we'll get 3, 1, -3, -1, and 3. So we're going to go up to 3 on our y-axis, down to -3. Our first point, well, let's just do a quick sketch of 3 cosine of x and sine of x in red and green like I did before. So 3 cosine of x will be that, the sine of x curve, and now if we wanted to add those two together, we'll get 0, 3, pi over 2, 1, pi -3, 3 pi over 2, -1, and 2 pi 3. So this comes down here, bottoms out here, well, it actually doesn't bottom out there. I think it goes down a little bit below the two curves. And so there's our 3 cosine of x plus sine of x graph. And that's it for today. Sorry about my voice.